Visit with Sinha in Anashamra, the history of the creation of the human race and its relationship to the extraterrestrial races. I was now in my 4th month of pregnancy. I felt remarkably well due to the incredible diet I was given. I really should not call it a diet, it was more like a sophisticated, gourmet vegetarian cuisine, since on Nibiru they do not eat any meat, fish or seafood. They do have wonderful milk and cheese, like foodstuffs that are produced from a fruit that is much like a coconut, and excellent eggs from the variety of birds that flourish on Nibiru. But more on that later. Since I plan to devote an entire chapter to telling about the diet and lifestyle of the Anunnaki, which has so much to do with their longevity and perfect health, and it has done wonders for me. These days, at age 60, I look like a woman half my age, and I had not as yet needed to resort to any advanced Anunnaki technology to achieve that. After all, the Anunnaki can live up to 500,000 years, so I have no idea when I will need cell rejuvenation. Come to think of it, while it is rare that the Anunnaki come to Earth, sometimes when they do, they may give the youth formula to someone, and he or she can live to be over 200 years old. Human scientists have recently begun to say that Earth people have the genetic capacity to live for 150 years. Truth is, they can live up to 500 if they choose the right formula. Incidentally, speaking of birds and cats, they are so unusual and have such astonishing traits that perhaps the flora and fauna of the planet Nibiru deserve their own chapter too. On that particular day, I went for an afternoon visit with Sinha Marduk's and Sinha Semiramish's great-grandmother. I call her great-grandmother for lack of a better term, but she was quite a few generations further from being just the mother of their grandmother. Sinha in Anashamra was immeasurably old, 400,000 years to be exact. Sinha in Anashamra sat under a shady tree, and she rose as she saw me and came to greet me. A strikingly beautiful lady, she had masses of glossy black hair, piled up high on her head. Her skin was smooth, and her black eyes shone with wisdom and the joy of living. She was tall and elegant, and always beautifully dressed, this time wearing a crimson robe with a silver belt and heavy silver necklace and earrings, all bearing deep carving and symbols representing the secret powerful names of the Anunnaki first creator, Al, Kal Lek Malkshrink, Na. I liked her very much from the moment we met, since she and I shared an interest. She was an expert in human history, archaeology, mythology and folklore, subjects she taught at one of the great Nibiru academies. Her knowledge was acquired at first hand. She traveled over time and space, learning, observing, writing. Her books were masterpieces. I never stopped asking questions, and she delighted in imparting information, so we got along extremely well. We settled ourselves under the beautiful tree that looked very much like a willow, but in the curious way of Nibiru trees, was connected to 2 other trees of the same species. The trees there seemed to nourish and feed each other. Perhaps that is one of the reasons the trees constantly bloom and fruit. She served me some gorgeous fruit, Wer Da Nor Ma. The name is quite poetic, it means the flower or fruit of the light. She also handed me a delicate, almost transparent goblet made of onyx marble and filled with fragrant rosewater drink I found utterly delicious, named Ma Awer Da Anbar. We ate and discussed our favorite subject. I already knew that the Anunnaki were not the first to experiment with and on humans, that about 145,000 years ago, the Igigel, or Igigi, were the first extraterrestrials to create quasi-human specimens. But I wanted to know more about what I was told were grotesque experiments. Yes, said Sinha in Anashamra. At the very beginning of their genetic experiments, the results were catastrophic. Their creations looked awful, bestial, very ugly, even frightening. This may have happened because the Igigi were more terrestrial explorers than geneticists, and therefore more interested in certain molecules found in terrestrial water and in various minerals, than in creating a perfectly shaped human race. What were the Igigi like? I asked. Did they look like you? Oh no, said Sinha in Anashamra. The Igigi did coexist with the Anunnaki and shared some traits with them, but they were totally dissimilar in their physical shape. They were huge, bigger even than the Anunnaki, but not graceful like them. They had strong facial features and lots of hair. And believe me, their appearance was not enhanced by their outlandish clothes. Nothing elegant or pleasant, everything was made out of metal shields. They liked to adorn themselves with many iron bracelets and necklaces that sported some strange insignia that to anyone but an Igigi would be quite ominous. Not a very attractive species. The Igigi were 245 million years older than the Anunnaki. But you must hand it to them, they were highly advanced. In mineralogy and minerals transmutation, the Anunnaki were geneticists and engineers with a strong appreciation for aesthetics. Therefore, the Igigi created a very primitive form of living beings on Earth, exactly as you, the humans, created unappealing early forms and shapes of robots, and related mechanical devices, at the dawn of robotics. These robots were functional but not pretty to look at, and the Igigi considered the early quasi-humans to be not much more than machines with limited mental faculties. So what did the early humans look like? Apes, really. You see, the Earth was extremely cold at the time, and the Igigi had to cover the human bodies with lots of hair to protect them from the elements. It took the quasi-human race thousands of years to evolve into an early human form, and even then not totally human, still looking like apes. Some of them had bizarre skulls and facial bones. I will show you pictures if you come to the academy. They actually experimented a bit with the early human forms. First, they created the Nafajin marker, meaning individual, on 3 legs. They consisted of a very strong physical body but lacked agility. Those bodies were created to carry heavy weight. The 3 legs' purpose was to support heavy loads they could lift and carry. Later on, the Igigi worked on a new human form that consisted of a body with 2 legs, to bring speed and better agility. Yet, early humans remain terrifying. Nothing like the biblical descriptions. The Igigi tried 4 times. They experimented in 4 different ways. Each time, they faced a problem in designing the human skull. Early Igigi creators did not want to put brains in the skull so human forms' bodies would not think. It was horrible. Yes, you could consider these early human forms as the world's first robots. The Anunnaki were the ones who created the brains for the humans. These early brains contained 2 million cells. But the Anunnaki too worked several times on the prototypes of humans. In their final genetic experiments, the Anunnaki programmed humans with the 13 original faculties. Did the Igigi treat the humans well? Not really. They were pretty vicious toward the early quasi-human beings, treating them very badly. This is so different from what science and religion argue about on Earth. Sinha Inanashamra, I said wistfully. We don't seem to know much. Well, the history and theories of human creation and evolution are distorted by both of you theologians and scientists, said Sinha Inanashamra. But you can't blame them. Much of the evidence has been lost. Anyway, to understand the quasi-human race, one must know about the 13 faculties. The quasi-human's faculties? I asked, a little confused. Yes, genes, molecules and DNA of the early quasi-human race. The Igigi programmed 13 faculties, or functions. The most important abilities were as follows. 6. Move 7. Sense danger 8. Understand by association 9. Memorize 10. See forms and shapes in 4 colors. These colors were bright yellow, representing gold, gray, representing minerals and rocks, blue, representing the atmosphere, air and water, and a very strong red, representing heat and blood. Other colors such as green, purple, lilac, etc., were not visible or known to the early and primitive form of quasi-humans. So they were not entirely primitive, I said. They were primitive enough. The first genetically created race could not speak. Even the concept of language was wholly unknown to them. Thousands of years later, the Anunnaki taught their own newly created race of humans to speak, read, and write. The Anunnaki's first genetically created human race was the seed of humanity as you know it. They began to populate the Earth 25,000 years before the construction of the Great Pyramids. I am only citing the pyramids as a landmark in human history to give you a chronological perspective. Greater, taller and bigger monuments were erected centuries before the construction of the pyramids, and some ruins can still be found in Phoenicia, modern Lebanon today, particularly in Baalbek, and in Mesopotamia, modern Iraq today. I have seen them all, at various stages of their development. How I would love to study like that. When I go back to Earth, I will have to study the old-fashioned way. It's a good start. Someday, when you come back to Nibiru, you will join the academy and go on from there. Nothing is lost. Do you think I will ever learn to travel in time and see things in person? Of course you will. We can easily teach you the skill, among others. How totally delightful that will be. You can visit endless points in time, learn the truth about so many things that are now obscure, and perhaps one day you will write a book about it, for your people, who knows? I do so much hope so. I'd rather think about it than about my current mission. Do that, think happy thoughts. Your mission here is difficult, we all know that, but so important for the greater good. We honor you for accepting it. I felt close to crying, so I had to change the subject. So tell me more about the real humans, please, Sinha and Anushamra, I said. You know what we are taught. The scientists talk about evolution. The priests and rabbis talk about Adam and Eve. All of it so inaccurate. You are absolutely right, said Sinha in Anushamra. As I mentioned before, they are not aware of so much of the truth of the matter. Contrary to all beliefs, including what Judaism, Christianity and Islam teach you, Eve was not created from Adam's rib. Men were created from an early female form that was fertilized by the leaders and the elite of the Anunnaki in a very special way that we will discuss later. These women lived in quarantine cities and had both sons and daughters, thus fathered by the Anunnaki. Some of the most puzzling sights of these cities, due to their size and functionality, were in Ur, Amrit, Ugarit, Petra, Batra, Tyre and Sidon. Early humans called the quarantine cities of these women the cities of mirage and the cities of beautiful illusion. And the quasi-humans who were made out of earth were not allowed to interact with these women. Thousands of years later, the inhabitants of what is today the Arab Peninsula and the lands bordering Persia, the United Arab Emirates and India, called these women the women of light, and those who were allowed to mix with them were called the sons of light. From this early human race, all humans came to life. God had nothing to do with you. In other words, the God you know, revere and fear today did not create you. Even the word or term God did not exist in the early stages of the existence of the human race on earth. Instead, gods or heavenly masters were used. And thousands of years later, those terms were changed to giants, Elohim, Nephilim, Anakim, fallen angels, you name it. Incidentally, the early Anunnaki who visited Earth were extremely tall. Some reached the height of 9 feet, and lived as long as 400,000 years. These Anunnaki did not leave descendants on Earth. Those who came to Earth much later, before the regional deluge, and right after that huge tsunami, left families behind them when they returned home. By home, I mean Nibiru, Zeta Reticuli, and Ashatatun Ra. These families are the origin of the hybrids, or extraterrestrial human beings living today among the people on Earth. It is very important to learn and remember this. Another important detail is the issue of population. For some reason, many believe that only greys or reptilians live on Zeta Reticuli, but this is not true at all. The Anunnaki had always occupied vast territories on Zeta Reticuli, and as you know, they are not the greys or reptilians, as so wrongly described in ufology literature. So many different races, I said. Indeed, said Sinha in Anushamra. Some 300,000 years before the creation of the cities of the women of lights, 46 different races of humans and quasi-humans populated the Earth. The greatest numbers were found in Africa, Madagascar, Indonesia, Brazil, and Australia. These races died out not because of famine, ecological catastrophes, or acts of war, but because of the disintegration of the very molecules and composition of their cells. The Anunnaki created the final form of human beings, and all of you are their descendants. I am rather surprised that records do not exist. Actually, they do, but they are well hidden. There are those who know that the Sumerians, Ashurians, Hyksos, and Phoenicians are the direct descendants of the Anunnaki, and that their descendants carry a rather clean genetic pool. Like you, my dear, you are practically a full Anunnaki, genetically. But they don't want it known, now as well as in antiquity. For example, Eusebius, the bishop of Caesarea Palestine, had genealogical records of the descendants of the Anunnaki who became Syriac. At the Council of Antioch in 363 CE, Bishop Eusebius intended to bring this subject in his Theophania to the attention of the members of the council. But no additional information or manuscripts about what happened at the council were provided. In the Syriac manuscripts of Zachariah of Mytilene, who frequently corresponded with Eupraxius, 2 references were made to the Anunnaki as the ancestors of the Ashurian Syriac. Another bishop by the name of Praetorius tried to destroy these letters. Fortunately, 2 hand-written copies were made, as the tradition of this era dictated, and were saved in the vault of a scribe. Those letters resurfaced in 1957 in a personal acquisition of Cardinal Mauchi, the patriarch of the Maronite Church in Lebanon. After Mauchi's death, those files were kept in the secret vaults of Al-Khazlik Monastery in Lebanon. As for modern knowledge, the original language of the Anunnaki is still intact and is currently used by top American scientists and researchers who work in secret American alien military bases in the United States and Mexico. In 1947, the first attempt was made by American linguists who previously worked at the OS, precursor to the CIA, to decipher it. They tried to compare it with the Sumerian, Hebrew, Armenian, and Phoenician alphabet, languages which are directly derived from the Anunnaki's written language. The problem they faced and could not resolve were the geometrical symbols included in the written Anunnaki's texts, but in 1956 they cracked the code. Those mathematical figures hold great secrets regarding an alien advanced technology used for peaceful and constructive purposes. The American military intelligence, and what's left from Dr. Fermi's group at Los Alamos, wanted to use this alien technology for military purposes. The language is in use now? Oh yes. The American top military scientists who work in secret military bases and aliens laboratories on Earth have an extraterrestrial lexicon and use it constantly. In that lexicon, or dictionary, you will find variations of Phoenician and Sumerian symbols. Some letters represent maritime and celestial symbols and measurements. The fact that the Americans are still using this extraterrestrial language should be enough to convince anyone that extraterrestrials, Anunnaki and Zeta Reticuli descendants, still live among you. Otherwise, why would anyone learn a language that cannot use to communicate with people who speak it and write it? Who else has a strong connection to the Anunnaki? I asked. Besides the Sumerians, the Phoenicians, the Hyksos, and the Philistines, there are indeed others, such as the very early Etruscans, Druids, Minoans, and people of Mu. Later, the Ashurians resided among the last remnants of the Anunnaki who visited Earth, and lived there for 600 more years. After that, the Anunnaki left Earth for good, to return only as visitors. One of the reasons for their departure was the discovery of the Tree of Life, also known as the Tree of Knowledge by humans, a metaphor for the acquisition of knowledge and understanding by the human race. On its own, the acquisition of this supreme knowledge caused the humans to rebel against the Anunnaki. What a mistake, I said. Had we stayed loyal to the Anunnaki, we could have spared ourselves so much grief. Yes, but that is the way humans are, I am afraid. but as I said, we love you anyway. I understand that there is a close relationship between your language and your religion, is it not so? Yes, it is. The Anunnaki have two kinds or styles of languages. One is spoken and the other one is written. The spoken language is the easiest one to learn, and it is used by the Anunnakis population. The written one is used in books exclusively and consists of 26 letters. 7 of these letters represent the planets that surround our star. Many of the Anunnakis' letters cannot be pronounced by humans because of certain limitations of your vocal cords. There are 7 additional letters that are complete words, and these words represent the attributes of our Grand Leader. Translated into terrestrial language, the Grand Leader is the creator of energy, in other words, God. However, the Anunnaki do not believe in a God in the same sense you do, even though they were the ones who created and originated the early forms of religions on Earth. However, those Anunnaki that have brought religion to Earth were of a lower class. The God they brought was a vengeful and terrifying God, something that the Gnostics and early scholars of the Coptic Church in Egypt were fully aware of. The doctrines show their disdain for such a God, and consequently, they called him the creator of evil and darkness. Later on in history, the Gnostics began to spread the word that this earth was not created by the God of the Church, but rather by an evil demi-god. The early human beings who interacted with the Anunnaki shared similar beliefs. If humans learn about all this, the religious aspect would be most difficult to reconcile, I said. And yet, there is so much that is in common, said Sinha in Anushamra. For example, your human ancestors borrowed many words from extraterrestrial languages and learned the secret 7 powerful names of God. Many of the Phoenician linguists and early creators of their alphabet borrowed numerous words and expressions from the higher class of the Anunnaki. Ancient Phoenician texts and poems, recorded on tablets found in Tyre and Sidon, included reference to symbols and words taken from the written language of the upper class of the Anunnaki. Members of an early Anunnaki expedition to Phoenicia taught the Phoenicians how to develop their language, and revealed to them the secret powerful names and attributes of Bel-Shilimrut. They instructed them not to use these words for ill purposes. Particularly, the word Balazamari is never to be said, spelled, or written. Later on in history, the Hebrews religiously observed this instruction, and pronouncing the word of name of God became forbidden. However, the Anunnaki revealed to the Phoenicians and Sumerians 7 positive and powerful names, attributes of the Grand Leader. If well used, these words can bring prosperity, good health, and salvation in moments of difficulty. The Prophet Muhammad learned these 7 words from an early Christian ascetic, a Sahara hermit called Raheb Buhaira. Today, Muslims all over the world are aware of these 7 words or names. They call them in written Arabic Asma Allah al-Saba al-Husna, meaning the 7 lovely names of God. Those names do not have numerical value or secret meanings as many scholars claim, simply because they were not originally written in a geometrical form. None of these words appeared in the so-called hieroglyphic measuring tape that the Americans found at the crash site in Roswell. The symbols and geometrical signs Americans found in Roswell were biochemical symbols. Also, early names of the Hebrew god were of an extraterrestrial origin. It is true that the Sumerian ancient texts and records mention names of some of the Anunnaki leaders, such as Utu, Ningishida, Ninki, Marduk, Enki, Enlil, Inanna, but the greatest name of all remains Bel-Shilimrut, also referred to as Bel-Shilimrut, Ankh. Terah, the father of Abraham, mistakenly worshipped Bel-Shilimrut, Ankh. Early Semites made the same mistake when they worshipped the leaders of the Anunnaki as gods who later became Beni Ha, Elohim, meaning the children of the gods. The Anunnaki never introduced themselves as gods. The words El Elyon and Yahweh or Jehovah were taken directly from the Anunnaki's written language. The original word was Yahweh El, Ankh, and El Elyon was Il, Ilayon, Imrut. It's hard to understand the difference between lower class and upper class Anunnaki, not to mention the other races, I said. It is, actually, quite bewildering. I know, it's rather difficult. Some of your scholars equated the Anunnaki with the Nephilim. This is not totally correct. The lower class of the Anunnaki are the Nephilim, although many historians call them sometimes Anakim or Elohim. The higher class of the Anunnaki is ruled by Baal Shalimrut, and his followers or subjects are called the Shtarout Aksal Anain, meaning the inhabitants of the House of Knowledge, or those who see clearly. The word Ain was later adopted by the early inhabitants of the Arab Peninsula. Ain in Arabic means eye. In the secret teachings of Sufism on earth, visions of Al-Hallaj, and of the greatest poetess of Sufism, Rabiha al-Adawiyah, known as Hachi Katu al-Hub al-Ilahi, the mistress of the divine love. And in the banned book Shams al-Marif al-Kubra, book of the son of the great knowledge, the word I meant the ultimate knowledge, or wisdom from above. Above clearly indicates the heavens. Later on it was used to symbolize the justice of God, or God watching over us. And much later in history, several societies and cultures adopted the eye as an institutional symbol and caused it to appear on many temples' pillars, banknotes, money bills, and religious texts. I think even now these symbols are still around, Sinha and Anashamra, I said. It is fascinating how such things stick around. Absolutely. Your Freemasons and Illuminati's favorite symbol is the Anunnaki's eye. And as everything changes in time and takes on different forms and meanings, the eye became a triangle, a very secretive and powerful symbol. George Washington carried this triangle with him wherever he went and wore it during official ceremonies. If you double and reverse the triangle, you get the Star of David. This very triangle on many extraterrestrial spacecrafts and on uniforms of military personnel in secret American military bases underground, working on alien technology and propulsion systems. And it will stay on, I am sure. 2. As an example, on February 17, 1953, an American millionaire by the name of Paul Warburg, who was involved with the triangle issues, shouted before the Senate of the United States of America, "We shall have world government whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent." Sounds rather ominous, I said. Yes, the triangle can be a negative force, said Sinha in Anashamra. When integrated without balance and cosmic harmony, in other words, spatial equilibrium, in architectural design and lining up territories, the triangle becomes a negative force on the map. If the three sides of the triangle are separated, such separation can cause serious health problems. The triangle becomes three lines of negative energy. This energy is not easily detected. Nevertheless, it runs strong and deep underground. People who live above these lines suffer enormously. In many instances, this negative power or current can negatively affect the present and future of many human beings. Similar to some ufologists who can identify UFOs hotspots on Earth, usually above ground, descendants of the extraterrestrials can identify and locate the negative currents underground. Each country has these negative currents or circuits underground. I do not wish to scare you, my dear, but I must inform you that some American states are located above these lines. For example, Mississippi, Alabama, the northern part of Washington, D.C., and 2 areas in Brooklyn, New York share this misfortune. Scary, I said. Poor people, suffering for no fault of their own. Many manage to overcome by sheer strength of character and goodness, said Sinha in Anashamra. Life is full of challenges for everyone. Life here seems very pleasant, I said. Yes, in many ways it is, said Sinha in Anashamra. And yet, we all have our burdens. But let's think of nicer things. How about a stroll in the garden? I would like to show you a nest of the most gorgeous new little birds. Their parents trust me. I always feed them good things, so they will not object. We must take some of these almonds for them. And so we went for a stroll in the magnificent garden, and the lesson was over for the day as soon as a tiny bird, all gold and red, flew clumsily out of the nest and perched on my finger. "She must be the first to take wings," said Sinha in Nanashamra proudly, as the parent bird sat on her hands and delicately nibbled at the delicious almonds. The sky was turning purple as the 3 moons of Zeta Reticuli started to set, the soft light giving way to darkness, and the scent of the night-blooming flowers began to permeate the air. Chapter 4. An irrevocable decision. How I had to choose between giving up my child for the common good of humanity or be transported to another universe, away from everyone I loved. And that, I thought, was that. The next day was my scheduled birth time. I was ready, and I was confident that I would not suffer under the gentle care of the Anunnaki physicians. I knew them all well now. They became my good friends, and whenever I needed to be examined, or have a little treatment, I was not even afraid and rather enjoyed visiting these ladies. I would feel nothing. That is, nothing physical. Emotionally, that was another question altogether. The thought of giving up my baby was preying on me. Perhaps the psychological burden was even greater because I was an adopted baby myself. I really can't tell, but I was more and more uneasy about it. And yet, it was a point of honor to say nothing about my feelings. I did not want to distress either Miriam or Marduk, who had invested so much time, effort, and work in the project. And so at dinner, I made a special effort to be cheerful and pleasant. And I really thought I managed to cover my feeling and dupe Miriam and her daughters into thinking that all was well. Marduk was not there. It somehow made me unhappy. I wanted to see him that evening before the great event. But according to Miriam, he had to attend some function of great importance in the great library they called the Akashic Library, where all the knowledge of the universe was supposed to be accumulating for eons. I was promised that someday in the far future I could see it, and I was curious about it, but right now it was the furthest thing from my mind and I was sad not seeing Marduk. I snuck out for a quiet walk in the garden, while the Miriam and her daughters were admiring a new picture the girls created, telling them I wanted to do my meditation exercises. I sat on one of the white marble benches, covered with gorgeous crimson and gold pillows, and really prepared to do my meditation exercises that the physicians taught me as a way to relax body and soul. I wish I could say I stuck with it, but instead, I started crying uncontrollably. After a short while, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Startled, I turned around and saw Marduk. "Marduk, I am so glad to see you. I thought you will be busy all evening at the Akashic Library." I sniffed and snuffled and tried to stop crying. I got away as early as I could. "I wanted to see you before the big day tomorrow, and Sinha Semiramis told me you were in the garden. But you are greatly distressed, Victoria. Let's talk about it, and see if I can help." "I don't know, Marduk," I said, wiping my eyes. "I don't even know how to explain. It's all so difficult." "Well, let's try to make it easier. There are always many options." "Do you mean I can change my mind even now?" I asked. "But the baby is due tomorrow." "Yes, you can change your mind," said Marduk. "I will not lie to you and say that it will be easy, but it is doable." "How?" I said. "I can take you, still pregnant, to another dimension, another universe, and you will keep the baby." "But what about my parents? They will not know what happened to me. They will have your former self. That one would have never met me, and life would go on as usual for the 3 of them." That was extremely confusing, but I thought I understood. Marduk will travel back in time and change the past. The girl that was I, the one that drove the car, would just go on driving, never meet Marduk, while I, the offshoot, will be here, on Nibiru. Maybe. I could not concentrate on that, because the really important question was very different, and I needed to know that right away. "Will I ever see you again, Marduk?" "No, you will not. That would be impossible. Each of us will be living in different dimension." That thought really hurt, and his tone of voice and the look on his face told me it was irrevocable. So what would happen to me in the new universe? "I will find you a husband. You would believe that you married for love and that this man was the father of your baby, and you will live a normal human life there. And you will stay here, Yes, I will have to stay here, give you up, both from the point of view of the project, and worse, personally. That will be the price. That is why I said it would not be easy. You could not come with me to the new universe. No, I cannot do so. I have only been here for 30,000 years, Victoria, since my last branching. A blink of an eye in Anunnaki life. I have obligations, which cannot be left undone without enormous damage to many people, both Anunnaki and human. Don't you care about losing me, Marduk? For a long while he was silent, just sitting there staring at ground. Then he said, yes, I would care very much. It will be more difficult for me than you can even begin to imagine. But an Anunnaki does not break his word, and does not walk out on his obligations. But humans do, right? Sometimes, he said. And if I decide not to give up the baby, if I decide to move on to that new universe, I will be breaking my word to the Anunnaki. We will not hold it against you, Victoria. Never. I took a deep breath and made my final decision. It was very hard, but it had to be done. I looked up at him and said, I will not either, Marduk. The birth will go on as planned tomorrow no matter how I feel. I have my obligations too. The relief in Marduk's black eyes was almost palpable. He could barely speak, it seemed. Finally he said simply, Thank you, Victoria, and then put his head in his hands and was silent for a while. I am very, very grateful, he added. And since you made the decision yourself, after receiving honest information, I feel your free will was exercised without any coercion. I did exercise my free will, Marduk. There was no coercion, but I have to admit so many years later, that the thought of losing Marduk was at least as strong in my decision as the idea of honoring my obligations. I am not as noble as Marduk, probably never will be. I want to make your situation a bit easier for you though. There is no need for you to suffer emotionally. Let me make you forget everything from this evening on. I will wipe your memory, take you to your room, and tomorrow, everything will be done as planned. The next thing you will see will be the old main road as you drive home. So we will say goodbye tonight, Marduk. If you agree to this plan. I like the plan, it's quite merciful, but would you do me a favor first? Of course. Please try to explain to me, in the simplest fashion, this issue of branching and changing universes. Particularly, I want to understand the marriage you told me about. The marriage? Why? Well, you see, in the future your personal life may be quite important to me, even the previous one. I will need to know such things, or they may burden my mind with questions and doubts. Now, I realize that if you explain everything now, I will promptly forget it, but as soon as my memory is returned, it will be there quite safely. And then we won't have to discuss the past, just move on into the future. That makes sense, said Marduk. As a matter of fact, this is a very mature and intelligent consideration. You are human, and the issue of trust is sensitive with humans, since their relationships are not as permanent as ours. Do you know, Victoria, we don't even have words for infidelity, or mistress, or extramarital affairs, or cheating. Once we make our choice, it is so permanent, it is as simple and as obvious as the air we breathe. But of course you need a different kind of reassurance. It's only natural, but it will all change. In a few hundred years, such thoughts will disappear from your mind altogether. So what happened to you? Well, first you must understand the concept. The closest metaphor in human terms would be that sometimes you wish you could do something differently, change the past, change a life decision, right? Yes, like perhaps going back in time to a point before you made a bad decision. Exactly. Or, if you think that you could do some good if you changed an entire event. Well, in our case, we do have the solutions for these dilemmas. We can split ourselves in two, or more if necessary, and move on to a universe that is very much like the one we are leaving. One universe which is like the one you are living in. Does that mean there are so many universes, that some of them do not resemble this one? Yes. There is an infinite number of universes. If you wish to branch and move, you have to study the matter very carefully and make the right selection. And the branching, or splitting, results in exact copies of the same person. Yes, at the moment of separation. After that, each grows, spiritually, in a different direction, follows his or her own free will and decisions, and eventually the two are not exactly alike. So what do they do first of all? The old one stays where he is, and follows his old patterns as he wishes. The new one might land 1 minute, or a month, or a year, before the decision he or she want to change or avoid. So let me see. 30,000 years ago you decided that something was wrong in your life? Not wrong exactly. I was living a nice life with my wife and family, but I felt that I did not accomplish much, that I chose an easy life of playing with poetry and literature, and I suddenly wanted to be more active in the development of the universe. What do you think caused this change? I witnessed a horrendous event, Victoria. A certain group of beings in our galaxy destroyed an entire civilization wantonly, killing millions of the inhabitants, in order to take over their planet for mining purposes. It happened while I was on a trip, and I actually saw the explosions while I was traveling. It was quite traumatic, and I thought, at that moment, that I must be active in preventing such events from occurring again. Ever. So you told your wife, and what did she say? My wife did not want to change our lifestyle. She was very happy just as she was, and if I changed my own life it would have caused her much pain. I would never want that to happen. But the restlessness was constant, and so my wife and I consulted, and together we decided that branching would be the perfect solution. I would go back in time to be in a spot before that fateful trip, branch out, and leave my former self, who was happy and content, to get on with his pleasant life. I, on the other hand, that is, the new person, would come to this universe and start fresh, doing what I want to do. And you have accomplished what you wanted. I have only just begun, but yes, I work hard. And for 30,000 years no one was right for you to marry in this universe. 30,000 years are not a very long time to find the perfect life partner. Well, so now I understand, I said. And do you hear from your wife and family? At first, just to make sure all was well, I viewed them occasionally on one of our viewing machines. Not anymore though. I don't want to spy on their privacy. They seemed as happy as ever, and that is all that matters. I think I do understand now, Marduk, I said. Not the technical parts, of course, that is beyond me. The idea of splitting a person, branching, is rather alien to me. I think you understand the principle though, said Marduk. You know, Marduk, for someone who is 300,000 old, and so intellectually superior to me, it is amazing, and really pleasant, how much you treat me as an equal. At my age, you could have treated me as if I am a fly on the wall, but you are my chosen life partner, Victoria. Naturally I would treat you with all the respect you deserve. Besides, as you know, I have glimpsed into the future, and I know the kind of woman you will be in a few hundred years, if you decide to come back to me. And yet, I am not allowed to accept or reject the marriage proposal. It won't be fair to you. You will not be exercising complete free will. Very well. But could you give me a small example of what it would be like to be married to you? I mean, show me what the merging of lights will be like. Now don't give me that alarmed look, as if I am breaking a horrible taboo. I don't mean the whole thing, of course, that is not allowed unless we are married, but just a little sample. But won't it influence your free will too? I can't see why it should. It would not do more than a date, kissing me goodnight, could influence my choice of a husband years later. Even a small sample would be more than that, said Marduk. Let's just take a chance for once, I said. It might influence your ability to choose and love a human man, said Marduk. I certainly hope so, I said. Do you realize what I will be missing if I meet and marry a human man? But what about free will? Free will may be overrated in this case, Marduk. Besides, you will make me forget, deeply forget, 100% forget. You know you can do it. I can't refuse it, said Marduk. I hope I am doing the right thing, but right or wrong I simply can't refuse. So, Just give me your hands, but sit as far away from me as you can. We don't want the light to catch on to the rest of our bodies, just the hands. And that, Victoria, must be our goodbye for a while. You will make me forget after the lights merge? Yes. Then, I will take you to your room, tell Miriam that you are not conscious to your surroundings, and tomorrow we will take care of business. I will be back for you, Victoria. Trust me on that. I nodded and extended my hands, and he took them between his own. I felt a slight warmth, but for a while it seemed to be just the normal physical contact of hands. Then, I saw a glowing golden light rising from our joined hands. I am not sure if any words exist that could do justice to how this felt, try as I might. There was a sensation of magnificent physical well-being, mingled and combined with a sudden understanding that everything would be all right. That the universe is working as it should, and that I could allow myself to be a part of it, totally and fearlessly. The pleasure that this combination of physical and spiritual joys produced was extremely intense, and I clearly remember thinking that if that was just a small sample of what marriage to an Anunnaki can be, well, the real thing was well worth waiting for. I felt as if my entire being was blazing, and then everything vanished, swept into a soft, velvety dark night that smoothly turned into an evening on a lonely stretch of road in Maine. And I was blissfully driving home from an afternoon study with my best friend. But something remained. I am certain of it, and no matter how many times Marduk later swore to me that my memory was completely stopped, still something remained. Some remnant of this incredible feeling that would guide and keep me in the 12 years that were to follow until we met again. And if you ask me, that beats free will every time.